Okay, so hello everyone and welcome to what is going to be the Breath of the Wild verdict. I am SpraynPray1000 and today we are going to talk about The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Now, just for reference, I played, I believe, the first 5 or 6, maybe 7 parts of this on the Wii U, and then really for not really for any major reason at all, I switched over to the Nintendo Switch version, just to check it out. I was just going to experiment a little bit, and I decided, well, you know what? It is a new game. It is a new Zelda game. Might as well continue it on a console that's new, just to see how the experience changes and is different. And I guess first off, to start, we'll talk about this the usual way. Let's talk about the story, then we'll go into the gameplay and whatnot, and we'll move on from there. The story of this game is basically your typical style Zelda game. You play as Link, once again, and your end goal of the game is to defeat Ganon, who has once again risen to terrorize Hyrule. This game, however, takes a little bit of a spin on it. It takes place 100 years into the future after you fail to stop him the first time. Link reawakens and sets off on a journey to finally put him away once and for all. And really, what I like about this story is that, unlike most Zelda games, which typically take place contemporarily with Ganon's rise to power and his actual threat, this game sort of has a post-apocalyptic kind of feel. You're traversing a lot of wilderness, a lot of forgotten towns, a lot of destroyed villages, as opposed to, filled places with lots of different people. And while the typical Zelda races are all there, between the Hylians, the Gorons, the Koroks, the Zoras, the Gerudos, etc., and the Ritos, I think that's all of them actually, there's still a nice variety between civilized places and a lot of just the vast open wilderness of the world. And I think moving on to the gameplay, that kind of really goes hand in hand. Link, who has just reawoken after 100 years in slumber, has more or less lost most of his memories, and part of the game is that you are sent to track down these memories. It's a very optional objective, and in fact, that's kind of the whole focus of the game, is this open world, natured Zelda like they've never really done before, where you can do literally anything in any order you want. Now, the difficulty of that might vary. Some areas are naturally easier than other areas, and some areas, require certain abilities to traverse. But the general feel of it is still the same, is that this is an open world style game like you would expect from more modern RPGs like, say, Skyrim or Mass Effect or whatnot, where your goal is generally not really defined. The end goal of the game is destroy Ganon, but how you get to it, what you do in order to do it, is completely different. And to go hand in hand with that, this game literally lets you rush to the final boss whenever you want. If you so choose to go to the final boss right at the start of the game, then the game will let you do it. The game will gladly let you march right over to Hyrule Castle and fight Ganon. However, will you be able to complete it without, a couple of different items and whatnot? Probably not, but there is that high difficulty curve if you so choose. Now, the arching plot of the game is that you are set out to free these 4 divine beasts from the 4 neighboring different races to help you just defeat and destroy Ganon. That sort of forms the basic arc of the game's story, is that you assist these 4 beast tribes in liberating their divine beasts, which are ancient weapons designed to destroy Ganon. You must purge Ganon's influence from them and reunite with your long-lost friends for one final showdown against Ganon. However much you actually want to do with that is left up to you. You could simply just gear up, get lots of gear, not liberate any of them, go fight Ganon, and yeah, you might not really liberate them, and the fight will be harder based on that, but you could do it. The choice is entirely yours how much you want to do. Now, for me, I did a mostly completionist run of the game. I did all the 4 major quests. I did a lot of side quests, and I did all the memories, actually, and I did a fair bit of random exploration and whatnot going around the world map. That kind of brings me to 2 of the major flaws of this game, which aren't necessarily game crippling by any measure, but are more annoyances. One, side quests, I feel, at least at the end of the game, don't really reward you too much. In fact, I always go as far as to say that after the beginning of the game, side quests don't really reward you so much unless they directly lead into a shrine, or unless they directly give you some rare item, which they typically do not. Generally, the couple hundred rupees that you get from completing a quest are only useful at the start of the game, where money is hard to come by. But by the time you're at the end of the game, where you could farm thousands of rupees an hour, it doesn't really matter that much. And I really wish that they had kind of taken a little more of that into account. To tie that in, the biggest complaint I have about this game is its upgrade system. The upgrade system for this game requires you to find Koroks scattered around the world map, right? It's basically a gigantic game of hide and go seek. Now, the problem is that the world map is gigantic, as I said. Nothing wrong with that inherently, but to find one random Korok scattered amongst all the enemies and the mountains and the everything else is ridiculous. It's annoying. It's a fetch quest the likes of which I have never seen before in a video game. And as you find more and more of them, you know, you can turn in their seeds, which is what they give you, to get upgraded inventory spaces so you can carry more weapons, which is a very vital thing you need in this game, is the ability to carry a lot of weapons. I'll talk about that in a second. More shields and more bows. And while I don't mind this sort of system, there's no way in-game to track Koroks, unfortunately. They're, at least not right now. Apparently they're going to add something later, but as of right now, in the base game with no DLC, there is no way to track Koroks, and that is a nuisance because you need to find up to 50 to hundreds of them to really expand out your inventory space so you can carry a decent amount of everything. This game, also kind of to go with its motif of open world and sort of crafting and whatnot, lets you find weapons that have different stats on them. For example, they might go farther when you throw them. They might have increased durability, more damage, a variety of different things. But every weapon in this game is subject to durability loss. Every single weapon in this game, the more you use it, the more it will break. And eventually it will break in your hands and you will be forced to switch to another weapon or to fight back using some other method. Now, I like this system. I think that more or less it encourages you to not just, oh, okay, cool, I have this level 60 sword. Well, that's the end of the game for all the enemies. Even the Master Sword is not exempt from this rule. That is basically the crux of this game, is that you have to have a variety of different weapons. And yes, you can loot enemy weapons, you can disarm enemies. There's a lot of different things that weapons can do. For instance, ice weapons will freeze an enemy. Thunder weapons will cause an enemy to get shocked, and they will drop their weapon and they will basically be stunned. Fire weapons will cause enemies to light on fire, and if you're fighting an ice enemy, they'll take extra damage, and same vice versa for fire enemies with ice weapons. I think that that's pretty cool. There's a variety of different weapons. There's rods, which can summon magic. There's swords. There's great swords, which require two hands. You can use shields in conjunction with two-handed weapons, but you cannot have them both out. So for instance, you can hold up a shield, but the second that you pull out your weapon using Y, you will immediately be forced to switch to that weapon, and you'll put your shield on your back until you put that weapon away. Sprinting returns in this game, which is very helpful. There's no dodge roll, regrettably, but however, if you sidestep and side dodge or backflip certain attacks with the proper timing, you can actually enter what's called Flurry Time, which allows you to rush into enemies and really lay into them with your weapons. It basically slows down time so you can deal extra damage really quickly. Now, the only foible with this that I'll say is that if your weapon is about to break and you enter Flurry Rush, your weapon will just flat out snap. That's it. You'll lose your offensive. And I think that at least for the sake of a little bit of fairness, you should be able to complete your Flurry Rush, because some of them are easy to trigger, some of them are hard to trigger, and you have to trigger each Flurry Rush using the corresponding dodge for that attack. So if the attack requires you to backflip and you sidestep it and you actually dodge it, you don't get the Flurry Rush, which is fine, but I would at least like you to be able to complete your Flurry Rush full of damage and whatnot without having to say, oh, well, I didn't dodge it properly. So, alright, I mean, I did dodge it properly, but my weapon broke in the first hit, which ended it. So yeah, another thing to go on with this game is that the environment very much itself is alive. This is a very open world game in the sense that you can hunt game. You can hunt animals for their meat. You can hunt, you can loot lots of different vegetables and stuff like that. The world itself has lethality to it. So for instance, if you enter a cold area, this isn't like other Zelda games where you're just fine. You actually need to wear corresponding gear to keep your temperature gauge in the safe zone. So if you stay in a cold area for too long, or if you stay in a hot area for too long, Link will start to take damage based on, you know, how dangerous that area is. So you can have, there's level 1 and level 2 cold and heat. You need to wear gear corresponding to that. On the more temporary side, you can make food and elixirs that will protect you, but those only last for so long. You can cook at pots, which allow you to basically gather up all these different items and ingredients you've collected. You can put them in the pot, and you can cook up to 5 different items for varying effects. You can botch cooking, which is very nice to see. There's a lot of really nice things you can make. Frankly, I don't think the cooking is that difficult in this game. I was able to reasonably make a lot of different unique recipes, and each recipe of food that you get can have between 1 to 3 levels of effectiveness. So for instance, you could cook together a dish of fish and it'll give you +1 attack up to attack 3 up. There's also defense. You can increase your speed. There's stealth in this game, which is almost a first for a Zelda game, like actual legitimate stealth. You can walk around like normal, you can sprint, or you could click the left stick and actually start to sneak around, which I think is a major help. That is definitely something that adds a lot to the game, because you can sneak up on enemies, you could sneak attack them. Some quests require you to follow an NPC as they walk around, and occasionally they'll look back. It's the kind of stuff that is very common nowadays, but it's really nice to see it done well here. It doesn't feel shoehorned, and I think, again, it ties into the whole idea of play the way you want for this game. You could play this game, for the most part, 99% of it going, you know, gung-ho into everything. You could play it very stealthily if you want, and I like that a lot about this game. In contrast to, you know, Ghost Recon Wildlands, this game sort of handles that toggle between combat and stealth very nicely. Again, weather comes into play. You can have snowstorms. You can have, again, in deserts, there'll be a lot of sunlight, so it'll be very heat-based. But most of all, thunder. If you enter an area, there can be rain. Rain will actually affect your ability to climb things, which in this game you can climb almost anything you can get to, including houses, including enemies, including mountains, etc. You can climb almost anything. You can swim as well. Swimming takes up stamina just like climbing, and you can upgrade your stamina and whatnot. But most of all, rain will affect or actually inhibit your ability to climb by making things slippery. But most of all, lightning will strike you if you are wearing any sort of metallic weaponry. Apparently gear isn't affected, which is fine, but if you are wearing any kind of metallic weaponry during a thunderstorm, lightning will randomly strike different areas, but you basically become like a lightning rod. And the game will notify you. It'll play a little cinematic on your weapons that sparks are coming off of them. That's your symbol to unequip them, which is a real nice thing. I like that you know, gets added. Again, it's a lot of variety in the gameplay here as you go around doing things. As I should say, I should probably talk about the way you upgrade yourself in this game, because at the start of this game, you have 3 hearts and a single stamina wheel. That's it. That's all you have. There's nothing else that you have. Unlike past Zelda games, where pieces of heart are littered throughout the open world, no one in this game gives you pieces of heart. In fact, the only way to upgrade your health at all in this game is to is to go into different shrines and complete their tasks. Shrines basically serve as mini dungeons for this game, each one having a certain theme or a certain puzzle aspect to it that you need to complete. On the flip side of that, you can wear better gear. Obviously, the higher your defense score, the less damage you take, which definitely helps. So you go from you will be one-shotted in this game, by the way. Make no mistake, you will take enough damage in this game that you will go from full health to 0 if the enemy is that strong enough. And enemy weapons are literally the same as your own. They have weapon stats, they have damage stats. So if an enemy is using an axe that does a lot of damage, there's a chance that you could get one-shotted if your defense is not high enough and if your health isn't high enough. And I like that aspect to the game, actually. I like the fact that this game, at the start, at the very least, is very high risk, high reward. Now, later on, obviously, as you upgrade gear and you run around and you find better things to begin with, the game gets easier. But I understand that they don't want to necessarily make this game into Dark Souls. You know what I mean? This game lets you choose. If you could never equip high-level gear if you want. You can actually remove hearts that you get from doing shrines. Actually, there's a statue in the game that lets you do that. So the game is as hard as you want it to be for yourself. And also, conversely, there's a lot of open world things and aspects about this game. So, for instance, you might never find the Master Sword if you so choose to not go looking for it. Now, the game kind of does lead you to it because obviously they want you to have the Master Sword, at least especially for the final fight, because the Master Sword, in essence, while it does break, it does regenerate. It's one of probably the only weapon in the game that will regenerate over time. Obviously, they don't want you to break the Master Sword and throw it away. Conversely, you cannot drop the Master Sword once you pick it up. But again, why would you want to, you know, given story and gameplay reasons? But the game does lead you to the Master Sword, which is fine, again. And yeah, I think that the biggest issues I have so far that I've talked about are the fact that side quests kind of don't really give you much, but that's sort of a smaller issue. I think the biggest issue is the inventory upgrade system for certain needs a definite fixing, because while I do not mind finding Koroks, I don't think finding hundreds upon hundreds of them in an open world environment, you know, where they could be anywhere with no way to search for them, is annoying. And this game does give you the ability to search for treasure chests for specific types of enemies, because each enemy drops a specific type of ingredient. You can search for weapons, you can search for creatures, but the one thing they did not let you search for was Koroks. And that is disappointing to me, because in all the time I spent traversing the open world, there is nothing I would have liked more than to be able to search for Koroks. Shrines you can search for, which is fine, but I would have liked the ability to search for Koroks. That should have been, in my opinion, a given. That should have been right off the bat. Boom, we're going to have Koroks everywhere. Fine. But on top of that, we're going to let the player search for them, which is, you know, crying about spilt milk again. But anyway, the only other major thing I'll say about this game is the presentation. The graphics of this game are kind of a mix between Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, and Skyward Sword. That's sort of the art style for this game. And again, like I said with Skyward Sword, it plays together nicely. It looks very nice. The only problem that I really have with it is that this game has frame rate issues. And it's not as frequent on the Switch version as it is on the Wii U version from what I played, but in areas where you have a lot of effects going on, a lot of fire, a lot of wind, a lot of glowing, a lot of lightning effects, a lot of different enemies exploding at once, this game has frame rate issues. And it's only temporary, but it still is jarring when you are in combat and a lot of things are going on, and well, this thing is blowing up, that thing's blowing up. Okay, well, by the way, the frame rate is dipping a little bit. That is a little annoying. And I wish that they would, you know, eventually fix it. But for right now, the game does have frame rate issues, which is rather annoying. So, otherwise, the soundtrack of this game is great. Definitely really enjoy it. Especially the dungeon themes are really nice. And the graphics look fine to me. I mean, I really enjoyed this game from start to finish. Now, what will I say about this game? I will say that Breath of the Wild is one of the higher quality games that I've played on this channel. It is one of the better games I've made on this channel. You can tell that a lot of heart and soul went into this game. You can tell that a lot of effort and time and thought was put into this game. And I was thoroughly satisfied from this game from start to finish. There wasn't a moment where I didn't really not enjoy the game. And while it's not my favorite Zelda game of all time, it is still probably one of the better ones that I've played. So what would I give The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild on the Switch? I would give Breath of the Wild a 94 out of 100. Again, the major reasons being they needed to put maybe a couple of different dungeons in here. There needed to be more reason to do side quests other than just completion, because money is farmable in this game and there's no real point. It's literally farmable by the thousands, okay? To put that in perspective from other Zelda games where obviously doing side quests gives you a shit ton of money, it's farmable by the thousands in this game, so that's not really an issue. On top of that, again, like I said, the inventory, I've beaten that to death in a half. But what I do like about this game is the choice factor, the open world nature, the complete revitalization of the Zelda formula. I like that a lot in this game, and that's why this game really stands out to me. And it does deserve most of the praise it gets. It really does hit home. It does a lot of things right, and I really like to see that. So what would I give it? I give it a 94 out of 100, because it does exactly what it needs to do perfectly. In most aspects, this game hits the nail right on the head, and it leaves me with a very satisfied feeling in it. So Breath of the Wild gets a 94 out of 100. Gets, you know, right now it's riding pretty high as my game of the year, and I really enjoyed playing it. So that's going to be it for this verdict. I'll see you guys next time for whatever game shows up next, and take care. Peace.